All right, it is Thursday, 6 a.m. I have Neuro Coffee in hand, and it is perfect. Welcome to the Coffee and Coaches Conference call. The iterations are going the same way, yes.
Yes. Okay.
So
So I guess
let's call it that. Can we do that?
yes.
He's walking on his ischiotuberosities, and if you watch him walk, you will see that the pelvis and the thorax advance at the same time in the same direction in the same way. The iterations are what is going in the same direction. So the pelvis and the upper thorax are both turning the same direction at the same time. And
So
you'll see that in just about any activity is that they will turn together. So when we're talking about relative motions of the ankle, right? Before you hit a constraint, you'll have opposing movement. So if I have a pronating, like a closed kinetic chain defined pronating ankle and foot, and the talus is adducting and plantar flexing, the tibia is externally rotated until you hit the constraint, and then it follows the talus. Okay, so which is it? Is it tibial internal rotation or is it tibial external rotation? Until you clarify your point of reference, you're not really certain how things are being described. And so again, I think that creates a lot of confusion, because when things start moving together, then you don't have the relative motions to describe the movement. So you have to be very, very clear as to where you are in all of this. And again, we have to appreciate that, because that's how you end up turning anyway, is you just reduce the relative motions, and then things start to move in concert because they're at the constraint, and so then they bring stuff along, and that's how we actually turn. Because as long as you have relative motions, the external rotations and internal rotations cancel each other out, and that allows you to go in a straight line, which is why we can talk about there's no sagittal plane if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm up for that.
But that there's no sagittal plane?
Yeah, go on.
There's no sagittal plane. Problem solved.
Oh, cool. Done. That was simple.
So straight plane movements in honestly straight movement in any direction, okay, is a cancellation of rotations, right? So if I want, let's just say, let's use the foot, the ankle, and the lower leg as an example, okay? Because it's a really good example. If I want to move my tibia straight over my foot in the classic closed kinetic chain dorsiflexion kind of a movement, right? For that to happen, like there is, and if I just use like calcaneus, talus, and tibia, for that tibia to go straight over the foot, you have to cancel out 3 rotations to get that to happen. Because the calcaneus doesn't move in a straight line, the talus doesn't move in a straight line, and the tibia won't move in a straight line, right? So I got an ER-ing calcaneus, I got an IR-ing talus, and I got an ER-ing tibia to go straight plane dorsiflexion, which is in the sagittal plane if that it actually existed, right? Visually, it goes in that direction, but for that movement to occur, I had to have cancellations of rotations. Otherwise, it does not happen. So if the calcaneus and the talus move together, okay, I can't move the tibia straight over the foot. And it's like what we visually represent. So we can have that conversation. We say, oh yeah, you're moving in the sagittal plane. It's just space. That in human movement, it doesn't exist. What humans do is turn. Like we have internal rotations and external rotations. And the way we manage those turns allows us to move in different directions. You're teaching people to do by moving them forward is you're teaching them how to access relative motions at the segments that are supposed to have relative motions. The people that come to us with problems don't have all of the relative motion available to them. That's part of the problem, right? If I don't have relative motions between segments that I'm supposed to have relative motions at, so let's just say that I have a femur and a tibia that are trying to turn in the same direction when I need them to move in opposite directions so they can go straight ahead. Then I have a knee that torques in a direction, right? then it can't bend and straighten like it's supposed to, because I have to do this to bend and straighten my knee in normal circumstances. If I have a knee that can only do that, right, then I've just taken away a movement capability that I need to produce movement in whatever direction I want to move in.
I just kind of want to hear, I guess, some of the effects of, I guess, the gradients within the knee when it comes to some of that surgical and how quick maybe that synovium repairs when it comes to some of those weight bearing activities.
So I just look at the synovium as I would like a laceration of your skin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they poke holes in a structure that is supposed to contain the fluid,
mm-hmm.
right? And the way that I move that fluid through the joint determines how well that joint behaves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I poke holes in it, I've just altered my ability to manage the volume of fluid that's in the joint and how I manipulate the pressures inside the joint, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the concerns that I have early on is that fluid that is either within the joint that I need for a normal behavior of the joint, and then the fluid that is around that joint that restricts my ability to move that joint, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to create irritation, because the more swelling that I have, the harder it is for me to get range of motion back. And so in the initial post-surgical, it's like, we'll talk about knees because that's kind of where it shows up the most, I think,
mm-hmm.
right? But my concern is that I don't have an intact synovium when I do stand up on it, right? And that's going to alter my ability to manage the joint like I normally would, so it doesn't behave normally. So am I creating more irritation, right? Mm-hmm. So do I have a stronger inflammatory response? Am I irritating structures that aren't supposed to be touched? Am I allowing them to touch? It's like all of those things are my concerns with this early phase. So you being on your back for 10 days after a knee surgery doesn't do anything negative other than help me manage the swelling. Mm-hmm. Right? The grave concerns over getting strength back after a knee surgery is ridiculous. Strength is the easiest thing in the world to reacquire. Fitness is easy to reacquire. What's very, very difficult is to manage a joint that's not intact, right? And so and again, I'm using the typical 10 to 14 days for tissue healing that would be associated with, like I said, you get a laceration in your skin, they sew it up, and they say, we'll take those stitches out in like 10 to 14 days. So I figure if all the tissues are the same, they're probably going to heal very similarly. And so I just use that window to manage the swelling after the surgical. It doesn't mean you can't get up and go to the bathroom. It just means don't be spending a bunch of time on your feet thinking that it's going to be helping anything, mm-hmm. right? Because the more swelling that anybody has after a surgery, the harder range of motion is going to be. So I think it's a little bit more important to be protective in that early phase, manage the swelling, get the range of motion back very, very quickly. Well, these people are coming back better and faster, right? And so now we have this acceleration, and now the medical people say, okay, now how fast can we do this, right? But we have to consider the consequences of that. Right? And in some circumstances, there may be no problems at all, right? Like somebody might be able to get up after a surgery, walk around, do everything that everybody wants them to do. They might be very, very quick, and they might still have a great outcome. But we have to respect the people that don't do that, right? And so it's always going to be an N=1 situation, right? That's why we got to be careful with the cookbook.
In PT school, we don't really learn how to quote unquote measure things like tibial internal and external rotation.
You can look at it in isolation, right? So if you take somebody to 90 degrees of knee flexion, right? So that's where your constraints are loosest. So like you do your anterior drawers and all that kind of stuff in that position because the constraints are lessened in that position. And that's looking at it in isolation. Michelle, what I would say is that the most important thing is that you have the full excursion of knee range of motion. So you think about this. So as I flex the knee, the tibia internally rotates on the femur. And then as I extend the knee, it externally rotates. So if you have normal knee extension, you can make an assumption that you've got enough tibial external rotation. If you've got normal knee flexion without resistance, then you can make an assumption that you've got enough tibial internal rotation. It'll be like if you get down on like in tall kneeling and then sit down on your heels.
Okay.
You would want a knee that could do that, right? And so that is a passive, that's at the passive constraint.
I know that's a complicated question, but
I haven't used a goniometer other than to prove to students that they're horrible at eyeballing measurements. As people roll back to regular schedules and stuff, I imagine we'll probably lose a few people, but I'm going to keep doing this. So I hope you will come back next Thursday with your coffee, and we will hang out and we'll talk about things more. Okay, cool with that?
Thanks, Bill.
All right, guys. I'll see ya.